So, we were all ready to return to our face-to-face worship services this coming Sunday. And then Thursday lunchtime, we had to make the really difficult decision to postpone that return for a couple of weeks. We're aware of what's happening down in the Logan area and in fact across the area covered by the Southside Uniting Church. And I know that this decision that we had to make is really upsetting to many people in our life of our congregation because we'd looked forward for over a month to coming back together. We've had teams of people who have gone into each one of our buildings and they have done a lot of work to put signs up, to move furniture, to make sure that it is COVID safe. We've had volunteers who have undergone new training so that they know what our COVID responsibilities are. They've done risk assessments. We've had people who have put rosters together and have volunteered to go on rosters. And of course, we've had all of that thinking through what our schedule is for our worship services. We're not just returning to worship that's 4 services at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning. We've had to think through different times, different styles, and the reality that we're not going to be, for a while at least, having weekly worship services at each of our centres. And I know that just thinking through those changes alone have come at a cost to many of us because we've had to think of what the implications are for us. We've had to put ourselves in a new pattern of understanding how we go to church, what is important to us in our worship connections. And I thank you for the energy that you've put into that. And we've built ourselves up. We got in a sense of excitement and enthusiasm when we wanted to be back together again. And then there was just that deflating moment when we said, let's just postpone it. But then as I thought a little bit further, Southside came into being on the 1st of January. And now at the end of July, over half the life of Southside, we have lived with the reality of the coronavirus. It's affected how we come together. It's affected what we do as a church, but it's also affected our entire lives. Each one of us has had to think through how we live with the reality of this virus. It's impacted upon the health of our community. It's impacted upon the economy. It's impacted very personally on some members of our congregation as they have lost jobs or suffered decreases in their income. And that adds to a whole weight of the complexity of what life is. I wonder, as we look through the changes that are facing us, both as a congregation, as a society, even some of the personal changes that are coming upon us as we think about changes in health, changes in where we live, changes in relationships. The deep regret for some of us is that we've lost loved ones during this time. How do we manage the reality of those changes? One of the tools that I have found very helpful is to think through a cycle of changes. The cycle looks at 3 different phases. The first phase of this cycle is what's known as the red phase. The red phase, we are angry. We are resentful. We don't want the change and we fight against it. We do everything we possibly can to go back to what life was like before that. But we can't. Life like we had is no longer there. And eventually, as we fight through the changes, we become tired of fighting, or we become tired because we have been fighting. And we start to emerge into the yellow zone. In the yellow zone, we are anxious, we are confused, we don't know what the future holds, but we do know that the past is no longer available for us. The yellow zone is also the dawning of a new possibility. Yellow, daybreak, don't know if that was deliberate, but it's there anyway. And as we start to turn our minds towards could be, we start to emerge into the green zone. The green zone is where we get an understanding of all that could possibly be. We start to embrace the changes. We start to put ourselves into the place. And even if we're not accepting of the changes, we still want to go back to what we are. We start to operate in this new normal. And the more we give ourselves to the new normal, the more we integrate, the more we see the possibilities, the more the new normal becomes the reality of who we are, and we become very, very accepting. The really unfortunate thing about that three-phase model, it's actually a cycle. And as we move through the green, eventually the green has to give way to the red as the new normal becomes the normal and needs to give way to the new thing. But what it does for me, it continually points me to the fact that we've got to be moving through it. Healthy, emotionally stable people don't stay where they've always been. They don't rail against the changes in life. They are resilient and they move forward with the changes. I write in the newsletter this week about Psalm 23, the Good Shepherd who walks with us, who guides us, who leads us, even in the very midst of the darkest of times. It's the Good Shepherd who helps us to be resilient as we face the ongoing, constant changes that are always going to be part of our lives. Thank you that you are part of the change that Southside is going through. Thank you that you have embraced God's missional future. Thank you that you are willing to see what it is that God will unfold before us. Thank you for the work that you are doing in just putting yourself in that place where you can move from red to yellow to green. I love to walk through this journey with you. Blessings on you all.